Hello and welcome to another Thursday night Q&A. Very pleased tonight to say I'm joined by my colleagues Keith Moss and Mo Jabber from our assessment team. Firstly, good evening Keith, how are you and how's your day been so far?
Good evening, Sam. Good evening, Mo. It's been very well, actually. Apart from the rain, sort of got very, very wet. I did a couple of times and realised that my work boots have got a leak in them somewhere. So I got a bit cold, but a good day all in all.
Well, so that sounds like an ideal end of year present. Put it on the list for new safety boots. And how are you, Mo, and how's your day been?
Yeah, hello Sam, hello Keith. Yeah, my day's been great. You know, out there doing the good work, seeing our good contractors and seeing lovely places. It was a cracking day. Everything went nice and smooth, and everyone was doing great work. And now I'm here, you fine fellows, doing this.
Brilliant. So I'll just run through a few house rules as we do at the start of all of our live Q&A sessions. We'll start off with the question of the week that we posted out on Monday, and we'll go through our answer and the rationale to that before that gets posted out tomorrow. And then while the audience are putting your questions into the chat, then we'll go through some of the questions that we didn't get round to answering from previous, or questions that we've had added into us through our social media accounts. So please do put your questions into the chat. Remembering that there's no such thing as a stupid question, only stupid answers. And please remember to be respectful to each other in the chat, because the whole idea of this evening's session is to collectively, we're going to help each other out with the aim that we'll improve our collective knowledge and understanding of all things associated BS 7671 and the electrical industry. So just some housekeeping. Firstly, we have to say that our team will offer advice and guidance on the questions asked, but our guidance has to be limited to the extent of the information provided in the question. We can't and do not assume any liability to anyone for any loss or damage caused by an error or omission in any advice or guidance given, whether that error is an omission is the result of negligence or any other cause. If we do make reference to legislation, it can't be considered as legal advice. And most importantly, individuals must rely on their own skill and judgment when making use of any guidance offered. We want to start a little bit differently tonight. We just want to do a quick poll in the chat. So I'm just going to ask the audience tonight if do you work for an NICEIC business? Obviously, you don't need to work for an NIC business to take part in the live Q&As. You just need to have a Facebook account or a YouTube or LinkedIn account. So please let us know if you are with an NIC certified business. If you're not yet, but you are interested in becoming NICEIC certified, or just give us a C in the chat if you're just tuning in just to participate in the live Q&A. So yeah, in the chat, if you could just post A, if you are with an NIC certified business, B, not yet, but you are interested, or C, no, you're not, and you're just tuning in to take part in this evening. So we'll just leave that running for a little while. We seem to have, I've got a bit of a problem with the camera orientation, so I'll try and pick on that as well. But while we're doing that, we'll just have a look at the question of the week that went out earlier this week. So earlier on Monday we asked, on a construction site, which standard should all 16 amp plugs and socket outlets conform to? And we gave 4 options. Option A was BS 1363, option B was BSEN 60309-1, option C was BSEN 60309-2, and option D BSEN 60309-3. We had a little look earlier today to see how people were voting in the polls, and so I'll just show you the result of that. At the time this afternoon, 48% of those that had answered had gone for C, 25% for B, and then a split between A and D on the others. So let's just have a look what do we think our answer is there? And I'll just ask Keith to give us that. What's our answer on that one, Keith?
Well, the answer is C, 60309-2, comes into regulation 704.511.1, where it states all plugs between 16 and 125 amp will be of that BS number. The other BS number, Sam, there, the 600, the one that's -1, is from 125 to 800 amps for most plugs. Ones that don't have interchangeability, that is not required. And the 1363 is our little domestic plug. And the other one was just a red herring that you threw in, not a British standard number.
Yeah. I think like normally we always have one where we throw there's a banana skin in there that just aimed, and then it tends to be like any multiple choice type question. That there's normally 2 or 3 that it could be that look very similar. So there's a tip for all our multiple choice questions. So things like the regs multiple choice question, always have a look to see if there are some of the answers that are very, very similar, and then it's normally most likely to be one of those rather than the red herring answer.
What we normally find as well, Sam, is that they have specific colours, like the 230 volt ones are normally blue, the 110 are usually yellow, and the 400 to 415 are usually red as well, but still with the same BS numbers on that. It's the ampage, not the voltage, is the BS number.
Yeah, spot on. Okay, so please do put your questions in the chat. While you're doing that, what we'll do is we'll look at some previous questions that were hung over, or questions that have come in. So the first one of those tonight we'll look at is a question that we do get asked. So if a house has a 3-phase supply, is it still considered domestic, or is it classified as commercial? And I think we're going to go to Mo for this one. What's your thoughts there, Mo?
Yeah, it doesn't change the fact that it's a dwelling, and it will still be considered domestic. These days you've got electrical appliances, a lot of electronics. We're doing away with gas. We're doing away, with other sources of energy, and we're kind of going towards electrifying everything. And this is why we need more power, more demand, and people are, getting 3-phase supplies installed to deal with that demand. So it would still be considered a domestic installation, whether it was 3-phase or single-phase.
Yeah, I think this might be a little hangover from the days when we used to produce separate domestic certificates, and then people thought it was different. But yeah, as you rightly say, if it's a domestic property, it's domestic. It doesn't matter whether it's single phase or 3-phase, how much is being used, whether it's 10k devices or 6ka. If it's domestic, it's domestic, and therefore then gets covered by our domestic installer scheme, which is the competent person scheme we run for domestic installations. So yeah, just to clarify, and we also believe that I think one of the major energy providers is considering, or has already started installing 3-phase consumer units in the property because of the amount of usage. So that's something that we'll keep an eye on as well. But yeah, we've been told that they're doing that as standard on new builds now. Okay, another one that often we get asked, do I need to notify the DNO if I'm installing an electric vehicle charging point? What's our thoughts there, Keith?
Yes, we do. Sometimes it would be before the installation, and then other times it would be after the installation's been done. The criteria before it really is if you're installing an AC charging point to start off with, and it's less than 60 amps, or what would be 13.8 kVA at 230 volts, then you must notify the DNO beforehand. If you think you can't verify what the size of the fuse is one of the criteria, and or it's a DC charging point, or it's a loop system from one house to another. If it's then greater than 13.8 kVA without a CT on it as well, you need to get permission from the DNO to carry out the works before you do the install. The other one is notifying after you've done the install and got the work certified. There's a flow chart from the ENA that give you some verification on that as well.
Yeah, as you say, it definitely needs to be notified. Depending upon the criteria, sometimes you can install and then notify. Other times you need to notify in advance. And as you rightly said there's some great information on the ENA website. So for those that aren't aware, ENA is the Energy Network Association, and it effectively acts like an umbrella for all the different DNOs around the UK. You can go onto their website, www.energynetworks.org. They've got a nice flow chart. It's the same flow chart process for both electric vehicles and heat pumps as well. And they're now trying to digitise, so they're trying to make the notification process for domestic, trying to make it online to simplify it, so they're saving time and not requiring people to produce paper applications. So well worth having a look at that information. It's nice and clear and pretty straightforward, easy to use. It also gives you a really good database of the recognised electric vehicle charging equipment, because again, if you want to install and then notify, you must be using equipment which is on the ENA database. So it's well worth checking that, especially when you get the request from a consumer they're going to supply the charger and just ask you to fit it. That's when you need to perhaps check that is it a recognised item of equipment on the database. Would you guys add anything to that?
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting when it comes to notifying the DNO. As Keith's pointed out, if you've calculated the maximum demand and it's below 60 amps, you can install it and notify afterwards. But then again, if it's a loop supply, you'll have to hold off and notify the DNO before you can install anything, let them know what the situation is. And they have a lovely, obviously, the form that you can fill out from the ENA, and you go through the DNO checklist. And when you tick off each item one by one, if you cross one of those items off, it means you're going to have to notify the DNO before you carry out any works. Just wanted to add that on.
Yeah,
and I think it says something about if you notice any damage as well, doesn't it? Or you've got any safety concerns. So I would imagine that looking at the head, if it's an old head, especially an old lead base, coming out the head, that would be the time to notify the DNO as well. Even if you suspect that the fuse is less than 60 amps or less, you're not going to know really without asking them. So
exactly.
Yeah. Spot on. Okay, please do put your questions into the chat. We'll be very keen to see them, and we'll do our best to try and answer them. So while we're waiting, another one which is quite a common question that we get asked. Can you tell me which BS 7671 regulation gives the permitted distance between a socket outlet and a kitchen sink? Mo, what's our thoughts?
I wish I could tell you that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I wish I could tell you that, but no, there is no specified distance in the BS 7671 regulations. What it does say is, you should install the equipment at a suitable distance. Regulation 528.3, which covers proximity to non-electrical services, it states where an electrical service is to be installed in proximity to one or more non-electrical services, it shall be arranged so that any foreseeable operation carried out on the other services will not cause damage to the electrical service or the converse, right? So basically, you can't install electrical equipment next to other services if they are going to negatively impact each other. And the associated note states this may be achieved by suitable spacing between the services, or item 2, the use of mechanical or thermal shielding. And, we have to take into account the external influences as well when we do install electrical equipment. There are you know, the RAG has, there are Q&A on the ESF, which the RAG has done about proximity away from a sink, which the number pops up in a few places actually, which is 300 millimeters or 30 centimeters. You'll find that in guidance note 1. You'll find that on the ESF website. That's good practice. So yeah, there's no specific distance, but the regs does say it should be spaced at a suitable distance, and there are what can I say? There are good practice guides out there that do specify 300 millimeters. So just don't install a consumer unit above a sink. That's what I say.
Yeah, no, but it's great that you highlighted there the electrical safety first. So again, it's not something that everybody's aware of. Electrical safety first do publish 2 sets of frequently asked questions. So there's a great database of questions and answers. The first one being for new installations, the second one being for periodic inspection and test of existing installations. So it's well worth it. Go onto the Electrical Safety First website, go into the area for professional resources and have a look at the wiring regulations. So it's often referred to as WRAG, W-R-A-G, Wiring Regulations Advisory Group. It's industry guidance there that's set out, and it helps you to, you know, provide evidence of where you've got your answers from. So now you can show your customers, you can show your colleagues that you've got some industry guidance backing up what you're saying. So yeah, really useful and freely available tool. If you're not aware of it, well worth having a look.
Definitely.
Okay, another question, again a common one. What code would I give for the absence of AFDDs on socket outlets in a high-risk residential building? Keith, can you help us with that one?
Yeah, C3 would probably be the most appropriate there, Sam. Best practice guide 4, which again is freely available on Electrical Safety First website. We wouldn't be giving that a C2 just because it says it needs to have it in a new build now. You'd have to look when it was built. If it was built within the last couple of months and it hasn't then been put in, there would be a reason to give it a higher, like a higher recommendation. But normally it would just be a C3. Like we don't go looking at things that are an existing installations that are potentially dangerous and retrospectively coding them what we would do now. So just be careful with that one. I think 7671 is for the later versions is when you'll find the AFDDs in. So if it was installed to the 17th edition or earlier editions, it certainly wouldn't have required them.
Yeah, and it's a really good point, isn't it? Because it's stated at the front of our big book, at the front of BS76M1, it clearly says that just because an installation was designed and installed to a previous version doesn't make it unsafe. So yeah, that's really key. And I think sometimes people get a little bit carried away in terms of it's non-compliant with current regs, therefore it must be unsafe. And it's not, because quite often the current regs introduce enhanced safety. And so long as you've got the fundamental safety, you're still safe. It's just that you haven't got the enhanced one. And again, some great freely available guidance. If you go to, again, back to Electrical Safety First, our industry partners, they do a best practice guide 4, which is specifically for electrical installation condition reporting, and we're showing on screen there all of the organisations that contribute towards that. So there's ourselves, there's the IET, there's ECA, other certification bodies, manufacturers, BEMA, City and Guilds, EAL, Select up in Scotland. So it really is an industry body giving industry guidance. So again, it's something that you can use as a reliable information source and freely available. So really good. we're getting some questions which we'll go through, but we'll just answer a couple more before we steer to those. Can the conductors of an AC circuit enter a steel enclosure through a brass plate without the brass being slotted? So now I guess we're talking about an equipment panel of some sort where we're bringing in our conductors. Can the conductors of an AC circuit enter the steel enclosure through a brass glanding plate? What's our thoughts there, Mo?
Oh yes, yeah, it definitely can, because brass is not a ferromagnetic material, so we're not going to induce any dangerous situations because it's not ferromagnetic. Steel enclosures, as we know, they are ferromagnetic. Regulation 521.5.1 states that conductors of an AC circuit installed in a ferromagnetic enclosure shall be arranged so that all line conductors and the neutral conductor, if any, and the appropriate protective conductor are contained within the same enclosure. Where such conductors enter a ferrous enclosure, they shall be arranged such that the conductors are only collectively surrounded by ferromagnetic material. Now, this is why we install them together in a metal consumer unit made of steel. However, brass or aluminium gland plates would often be used to provide non-ferromagnetic entry points into the steel ferromagnetic enclosure. Commonly these days, suitable toughened plastic or Paxilin may be used as an alternative to metal gland plates. So, long and short of it, yes, brass can be used, so can aluminium, so can plastic, and so can Paxilin, because they're non-ferromagnetic.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's back to our old science days, isn't it? That if they were ferromagnetic, then our current carrying conductor is going to create a magnetic field. But our AC current carrying conductor is going to create an alternating magnetic field, and that alternating magnetic field, when the steel or ferromagnetic enclosure is within that field, will generate currents in that material. The bigger the current that the cables carry in, the larger the magnetic, or the stronger the magnetic field, the bigger current it's going to induce into the material. And so it can, I've seen severe cases where it can cause buckling and warping of material because it generates heat. So that's what we're trying to avoid, and as Mo said, as long as we use something where those eddy currents can't be generated, because although we've got an alternating magnetic field, we haven't got a material that will allow the currents to form, then that, yeah. So back in the day when I had a real job, we used to do a lot of glanding of field cables that were connected to instruments, etc., into and we would use a specialist gland plate to make sure it wasn't steel.
Yeah, and back in my days where we used to do bugle projects, we used to always install we used to use Paxilin where the rifle boards were, etc. We used to use a lot of Paxilin, but yeah, I mean, that's it. As long as we use non-ferromagnetic materials, you will be fine.
Yeah. Okay, another one that we get, how far apart do two things need to be before they can be considered not simultaneously accessible? What's our thoughts there, Keith?
That's 2.5 meters, Sam, and it comes under regulation 417.3, placing out of reach. The two parts are deemed to be non-simultaneously accessible when they're more than 2.5 meters apart, and that really does correlate to both arms being extended on a grown man or grown person, and hand-to-hand distance is greater than 2.5 meters generally. So that's where that comes out of. Great.
Okay, we've got some questions that have come in, so we'll take a look at those. Some of them not directly technical, so we'll try the technical ones first, and then time permitting we'll come back. So one of the engineers tonight, question about AFDDs. If a customer doesn't agree to having them installed, do we mention this on an EIC? As once signed, this document becomes a legal document, and if there's an electrical fire due to an issue with an electrical item, then we electricians don't have proof that we told the customer that it should, even though the regs BS 7671 state it's only a recommendation. Page 18 of the regs state that a recommendation is a should with the language used in the regs. So yeah, a little bit I'm a little bit unclear in the question in that perhaps they're looking at the sentence around regulations that says they're recommended for other circuits. The first thing I'd say is if it's a requirement, if it's a BS 7671 requirement, then we can't just say that the customer didn't want it, and because we won't be able to certificate it that it's compliant with 7671. So that's the first thing. So if something's a requirement for compliance with 7671, then it needs to be done, and if the customer doesn't want it, then strictly speaking we can't do the work because we won't be able to do a certificate. There are those instances where we could go down the route of a departure, but then a departure is only permitted where we can justify it as being no less safe, and we would have to provide evidence for that. So if it's a requirement, then we really have to do it, and we can't be issuing a certificate, and well, we certainly can't issue a certificate and just put that the customer didn't want it to happen. If it's the situation of where the regs say it's a recommendation, then as you've rightly said towards the end of your question, a recommendation, people originally often saw it as being a soft requirement, and that's not the case, which is why that wording was added into the Brown Book in 2022 to clarify it. So a recommendation is really just one option of which there are others. So you don't have to do it, but I think the recommendation that's associated with AFDDs provides enhanced protection possibilities. So you might do that another way. What's your thoughts? Would you say on that? While you're doing that, I'll just have a look at the reg that I think the member of the audience is referring to.
So what I'd say on that is regulation 421.1.7.
Yeah.
It gives 4 examples where we say they shall be fitted.
Yeah.
And the shall bit is the high-risk residential buildings, houses of multiple occupancy, purpose-built student accommodation and care homes. So in those places, you shall fit them under that regulation, and would not be able to then say to the client, well, if you sign this, we won't have them in. But if it was in an ordinary domestic installation where they weren't wanted, it wouldn't come up, in my opinion, unless you wanted to speak to the client about having that enhanced safety. Then they could say, oh, no, I don't want them, and then you wouldn't need to get them to sign anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So I just reminded, that because there is as you rightly say, after it's listed out the 4 locations where there are a regulatory requirement, there is a sentence then that does say AFDDs conforming to BSEN 626 are recommended for single phase AC final circuits supplying socket outlets not exceeding 32 amps. So it is only a recommendation, it's not a regulatory requirement. So in that case, I think it's a good idea to record the fact that although you may have recommended them and suggested them based on the building or its usage, it's a good idea to then confirm that the customer or the responsible person didn't want them, so that, as you've inferred, at a later date, if something were to happen, you've got evidence on your certificate. But as Keith said, if it's AC final circuit supply and socket outlets rated up to 32 amp in one of the 4 instances listed, then those have to be done. That's something that we can't avoid, because we wouldn't be able to sign a declaration to say we've conformed with 7671. Would you add anything to that, Mo?
No, just about to say exactly what Keith was going to say. If it falls into one of those categories, high-risk residential buildings, care homes, HMOs, and student accommodation, then we have to install them as the BSM 671 requirements, ask of us, and that's what should be done. And everything else is a recommendation. you will have incidences where where you may want to apply those extra measures, where you've got I don't know, houses with thatched roofs, or places which can be high risk of fire, which is a good recommendation to apply those devices, AFDDs. But yeah, nothing more really to add. I think you guys have said it all really.
Yep. Another one from tonight's audience. Do you require SPDs to be retrofitted to buildings with lightning conductors? So I'm thinking there of the fact that 7671 recommends that installations with lightning conductors are provided with type 1 SPDs as close to the origin as possible. In terms of, is it a retrofit requirement? What do we think?
I think if the reg says it's a requirement, isn't it? It should be within 1 meter of the origin.
Yeah. So I think if you were doing work in that installation, so you were a new install or additions and alterations to an existing install, and then we've got the situation of we need to ensure that the existing installation is adequate, and if you believe that there's engineering wise there's a safety risk because of that factor of flashover associated, then yeah, for compliance with 7671 you would install those SPDs as close to the origin if there was a lightning protection system on the building. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, and maybe contact the if you can find out who either services or installed the lightning protection system as well. Take some recommendations for them, because it does come outside the scope of 7671. But generally, I would agree with Mo there. If you're working on one and it needs to be fitted, then it needs to be fitted. But take some information from the lightning conductor company as well, if you can gain it.
Yeah, because there's also bonding requirements, aren't there, as well as the SPD, which are just as important, because if it is a situation with a lightning stroke, then that can have an impact on the installation because of the voltages present.
Which takes us back to 132.16. We need to check the adequacy of the installation before we even start our work.
Yeah. A couple there, we'll pick them up, not directly technical, as I say, but while we're waiting for other technical questions to come in, and just because it's opportune with the timing. So one of the engineers tonight has asked, quick question, not so much technical, which they've put in brackets themselves, which is great. With the recent EAS changes, is every employee required to undergo their 2391? I work for a large electrical contractor in the new build sector. So just to make people aware that there's a requirement, and there are further requirements coming in under the electrotechnical assessment specification in October 2026, and one of those requirements is that people engaged in periodic inspection and test will require a 2391 Sitting Guilds or EAL equivalent qualification, so a level 3 in inspection and test. The situation is that it's not necessarily every employee, but it's every employee who undertakes periodic inspection and test. So if you're in a large organisation where there are different groups and different departments that don't do periodic inspection and test, they're only involved in install, then those people wouldn't require it. However, the QSs require it, but all the employees don't. So a QS would require that qualification, or a new QS would require that qualification, and any employees that undertake periodic inspection, but it's not all employees in the electrical business. Have I got that right?
Yeah. So anyone carrying out periodic inspection and testing is required to have an EIC, a periodic inspection testing qualification or equivalent. So if they're doing the work, they need the qualification. If they're not doing the work, they don't need to worry, because they're not carrying out the ICRs. And that's the same for EV car charging, PV installations. If you don't do the work, you're not going to need the qualification. But if operatives are including the QS, then you will need that.
Yeah. Someone's picked up a good point, and it's something that we'll follow up. Not necessarily tonight, but one of the members of tonight's audience has picked up on the point of three-phase installations in domestic properties, and has highlighted the fact that the newly introduced domestic installation apprenticeship doesn't include three-phase. So that's something that we'll feed back. Because as we say, we're seeing it starting to appear. My understanding was that one of the big DNOs sort of down in the southwest were starting to fit three-phase as standard. So that's something that will feed back through the right channels. That if that is the case, then that certainly does need to be considered, even for the domestic apprenticeship. So good point, well made. Someone's also come back with about the SPDs, confirming that whether an SPD requires or has an overcurrent protective device, and a little bit of mixed messages. And we do get some conversations on telephone and email helpline about that. There is a requirement for SPDs to have its associated overcurrent protective device. But what we find is that there's a mixture. Some SPD manufacturers build a combined device which includes the overcurrent protective device built into it. And then other manufacturers have got standalone SPDs, and which therefore require a separate overcurrent protective device. But they do all need it. There's a regulation that, while we're talking, I'll have a look at, that says we shouldn't rely on the service fuse for that overcurrent protection, because we have to ensure that when that device does operate, we don't interrupt the supply to the rest of the installation. So it does need to be, every SPD needs an overcurrent protective device, but just be aware that most or certainly several manufacturers of SPD now provide that as a combined unit. It has its own overcurrent protective device. Are you seeing examples of that out in the real world, Mo and Keith?
Yeah. A lot of those examples.
One of the more commonly used distribution manufacturers has just recently changed from having their SPD protected by a 32 amp overcurrent protective device to changing the colour of it from orange to pink, and now they're not having it built in. So you obviously can't mistake which one's there. They've changed the colour, and their documentation's quite clearly stating that it doesn't require one now. So it just opens up an extra way in the board.
Yeah. And that, that was the advantage, wasn't it, of manufacturers providing it as a single device, because it didn't take up a way in the board. Another one of the engineers tonight said, should lightning conductors be bonded to the MET? And he's put in brackets large domestic house. Well, yes, absolutely, it's a requirement. Again, I'll pull that out as a reg number, but lightning protection, if it's got lightning protection, then again, pardon me, as Keith has said, perhaps consult with the lightning protection engineer, because they'll be able to assist with sizing and connection location. So but definitely requires bonding. Another one's asked, hi, what departure/info would be required to be noted on an EIC for using EV ultra cable for an EV install? There's obviously within 7671 there's a list of cable types and standards to which they need to conform. We get this with a few different things, not just with EV, PV and just some external, but if you are engineering wise selecting a cable which doesn't currently comply with the British standard for that cable type or containment system type, then you would need to get information from the manufacturer, test information, for example, to confirm that it meets the requirements of 7671 for that cable type, i.e. voltage ranges, insulation, etc., and provide that to confirm that you're no less safe. Because remember, 7671 is very clear. We are allowed to have departures, and in some instances those departures are to cater for the fact that we're using new technology, new products which aren't included currently in the standard. But when we do that, when we have a departure, we have to provide the information and attach it to the installation certificate that it's no less safe. So if it was a product, we would suggest that you become very reliant on that product manufacturer, and they will have the information that you can then use to confirm that it's no less safe than if you had complied with 7671, which in these instances would be by using a known standard cable. Any other thoughts on that one?
Yeah, just basically obtain a declaration of conformity. Isn't that right, Sam, from the manufacturer?
Yeah, that will do if it's, you know, to make sure that it complies with the same requirements, and that's the thing. And as I say, it quite often happens when there are new product developments that you know have been designed and built to meet requirements that and those products weren't available when the standard was last written and published. So yeah, it's clear, and again, we are allowed to have departures, but it's very clear within 7671 it says we need to be able to provide information that it's no less safe than if we had complied. Starting to come in thick and fast now. When replacing a consumer unit in a HMO, are AFDDs required on the socket circuits? Yes. So if you look at the regulation that we referred to earlier on, 421.1.7. Oh no, sorry, I've just realised, when replacing a consumer unit. So yeah, it's not a new circuit. So our advice is when replacing a consumer unit and you're effectively disconnecting and reconnecting the existing circuits, there's no requirement for compliance with 7671 to provide AFDDs on that circuit. You need to make it very clear when you complete your certificate and the section in the certificate that says the work covered by this certificate, your work is the replacement of the consumer unit with a reconnection of existing circuits which have been unaltered. So that then makes it clear what you're certifying, and because you haven't installed those AC circuits supplying socket outlets, you wouldn't be required to put AFDDs on them. Yeah, I misread the question at first, but I could see your faces saying to me, no, stop. So yeah, good point, well made. Would you add anything to that, guys?
No, you've hit the nail on the head with that one, sir.
I had a chat with my client. If it was a care home and they were spending a lot of money on an upgrade, it might be worth them considering AFDDs, but it's for them to make that final decision. Yeah, good point. So again, if you recommend it and they don't take up that recommendation, then record that so that at a later date it's known that you did provide it as an option, but yeah, it wasn't accepted by the customer or responsible person. Do metal back boxes require an earth even with a plastic switch? I've come across a few with no earthing, but under fault conditions could become livening up the screws which are accessible. Again, quite a common question. So if we're considering the example where the metal back box itself isn't accessible because of the way that it's installed within the fabric of the building and then covered by the socket outlet or the switch itself,
then strictly speaking there's no exposed conductive parts which need to be earthed. You mentioned the screws, and there is a regulation which talks about an exemption, and it's a common one, which is why it basically says that anything small enough that can't be gripped doesn't need to be. So if you have a little look at Reg 410.3.9, and in particular ident 3, it says the provision for fault protection may be omitted for the following equipment, and it's exposed conductive parts which, owing to their reduced dimension, and it gives a maximum of 50mm by 50mm, or their disposition, so their location, can't be gripped or come into significant contact. And I think generally it's accepted that the screws on a plastic accessory would fall within that. So strictly speaking, they wouldn't need to be earthed. Again, it's something that you might earth the back box for good practice, in case, especially in installations where perhaps that front might get changed. If it were to get changed to a metal front, then you would want perhaps the earthing. But the basics that the screws aren't large enough to be gripped or come into significant contact, there's no requirement to provide that earth for those. Anything you'd add there?
I would also add that, if you have a socket face, the back box has got a fixed lug, and you're screwing into it, you are potentially earthing the back box via that screw. And that's all I'll add to it. As you said, it's not an exposed conductive part, and it's always good practice to add that CPC in there.
Yeah, that's what I would add as well. Best practice, really. I would have added one from the back box to the front. But if it's not done, you wouldn't be able to code it in any shape or form.
Yeah. Again, it's one of those things that I always remember when I started to get into the regulation world. There were so many things that I realised weren't actually regulations. They were just best practice for the companies that I'd worked for. And I was amazed then when it's the situation of, well, show me the reg that says you need to do that, and it became apparent to me that a lot of the things were chosen by the company as best practice, so over and above, and then it was made very clear to me 7671 are they're minimum requirements which we can never go below, but we can always go above. So yeah, it's really important to remember that. Okay, we'll go with one last one, and then we'll wrap it up again. So again, a question that we get asked a lot: for compliance with 7671, do I need to test AFDDs? What's our thoughts there?
Well, the only test required by BS 7671 is if there's a manual, if it's a manual operated test facility is provided. Yeah. So like, for instance, 61009-1 and RCBO, you've got a manual button which you can test the functionality of that device and if it's working. Unlike an AFDD, it's a 62606 device. It has an internal testing function, right? So you don't have a button on there to test it. So an interesting one would be a combination of both devices. So, there is, when you've got an AFDD combined RCBO, you will have a functional test to test the RCD aspect of the device. And then the AFDD within it should have an internal test. And the indicators on the front of the AFDD will indicate whether there's an issue after, if the test carried out has an issue, it will light up with a certain color and it will indicate whether there is a fault with it. So, yes, with AFDDs, if it has a test function facility, then you'd have to test it. But generally, they don't have them. There are some, but generally, when you see them out and about, you don't have them.
Yeah, and we're also aware of some manufacturers that there's an automated test function within the module itself, and as you say, there's then a display that it's functioning properly, and that automated test is often on power up and periodically through. So we're aware of some that will test themselves periodically throughout the day to make sure that they're still working.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, little bit of housekeeping before we run out of time completely. So we appreciate that you're if you're not certified with us already, but you may be interested, please do visit the website to get certified. We've got electrotechnical and non-electrotechnical schemes. So electrotechnical including approved contractor, domestic installer, and the rented sector schemes. MCS covering PV as well. So please do have a look. Also, likewise, training requirements. We run a number of training courses across the country, so please do look at that, and we will look to do bespoke ones at people's premises as well. Would like to say thank you for all bodies participating tonight. We've had some great questions. We've got a couple there that we're just going to run out of time and not get to, but we'll look to pick those up next time round. So thank you to everyone for participating in the chat and asking the questions. Enjoyed that tonight, Keith and Mo?
Yes,
I loved it. Yeah,
great questions as well from the audience there. So well done, everybody, for putting them to us.
Yeah, thank you for putting all your questions forward. Yeah, that is very. I'm always impressed when we have all these questions coming in, because that's what we're here for. So yeah, thank you very much, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll always try and help, and from our point of view, every day's a learning day. I'm always amazed that I'm looking for the answer to something and I find something else that I didn't know existed, and I go, oh my god, how long has that been there? And then someone tells me it's always been there. So yeah, it's a great industry from that respect. Thanks very much for participating. If you're watching this live or if you're watching it on demand, we do this once a month, typically the first Thursday of each month. So we'll be, this was the last one of 2025. It sounds mad to say that, but we'll be back again Thursday the 8th of January at 8 o'clock in 2026. Wow, that just, it's going to take a bit of while as per normal getting used to writing that. Before we go, I also just want to make people aware of the Electrical Industries Charity. It can be quite a stressful time at this time of year, and often throughout the year. So please do be aware. The Electrical Industries Charity is, as it says, it's a charity specifically for organisations, individuals family members that have been involved in the electrical industry. Offers a wide range of support. It's recently promoting some tools to help us talk, because there are a lot of people within the electrical industry that don't talk about their issues and what they're going through. So please do, if you are, click on the QR code and you'll get access. And I can honestly say, as we very sadly lost a member of the technical services team this year, a fantastic electrician, a brilliant engineer, and fantastic human being, Paul Dudley. So I can verify personally how supportive the Electrical Industry Charity are. So it doesn't have to be bereavement. Whatever you're going through, get in touch. They can offer financial support. They can offer guidance and support through talking therapy, and offer a wide range of alternatives. So please do reach out if you need them, and they will do everything they can to support you. But yeah, really worthwhile. We and many others support it, so we've got some great links, but yeah, they are a standalone charity, and if you are in need, well worth going to speak to them. Okay, well that's it. We've run out of time. We were talking at the beginning about how quickly these hours go each month. What's your thoughts on that then, Mo?
I have to say it's gone very quickly, and I've just got into the gist of this. I'm really enjoying it, and it's a shame that it has to end so soon. So hopefully we'll see what happens next year. Yeah, definitely. And Keith, thanks very much. What any final words from yourself?
No, I'd just like to wish everybody happy holidays, really, and just to say, Sam, your words there about the charity yeah, if you need it, it's out there and it's a fantastic charity. But look after yourselves, everybody, and have a lovely time.
Yeah, hopefully everybody will get a bit of a break towards the end of the year, and yeah, good luck to you, and hopefully use it well.